Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very happy to be here. This is Cooperation SIG, Special Interest Group. We are very happy to start the session. I understand that we are starting just a little bit late because the earlier session took just a little bit longer. And mingle and networking people are important, so we want to give the opportunities. So what is Cooperation SIG? Just give a little bit of an introduction. It's a broader internet topics that we are trying to address here. The APNIC has a good community. We are seeking for advice, guidelines for the future activities here. We are very happy for you to join here because everything that we are doing, we are talking, we are discussing is going to be impacting in the future. And at the end of the day, that's impacting us as each individual as well as a community. So, and this is, I think it's a very unique opportunity because especially this time, I think in the past, we talk about various topics, a broader topic. We talk about the new norm. We talk about internet jurisdiction, because obviously that's a topic that involving with different economies. We talk about cybersecurity. We talk about the sustainability for ESG, for the environmental, social, and governance. So there's no limitation pretty much. But this time, I think it's more interesting because we bring a few things together. We found that there's more interest to our community who's attending here. So there's it's a unique opportunity, as I said. We want to learn and picking up the knowledge, the brand from each other. And so this time we're going to talk about regulatory challenges that's facing ISP. And we're going to also touch some of the topic on the governance. So some of the major things, I have a wonderful panelist today from different expertise. And content filtering and the censorship is one of the things we're going to be touching on. Because there's some ISP that's required perhaps by their government agencies or by enforce them to do some censorship. Obviously, this becomes a concern because it involves of the freedom of speech and the privacy. So how do you balance that? And what are some of the regulations that's being enforced or being asked? So we're going to touch on that. We're going to talk about data privacy and the security. Again, when people start collecting data, store data, processing data, that involves many different issues that people are interested to find out. Some sensitive data obviously raise some of the issues and concern. How do we deal with it from the different aspects of it? So this is another area we're going to be talking about today. And intermediary liability. Again, the key word, I think it's the balance. How does the ISP do that to protect the freedom of speech, to protect the privacy? And there's the challenges for the company to do. There's a lot of the laws and regulations, not just the copyright, but the fragmentation, the cyber crime. So all this has many entwined with each others. And of course, neutrality is another thing we want to make sure that we touch on that, hear the experience from my expert panelists. The lastly but not least, the global inconsistencies. Each different economy may have regulations apply heavy or light. So they have regulations, there's different frameworks that touch on that. So you're going to see a variety of things. Each of the things you can look at individually, go deep dive, but altogether, they are impacting our internet. So I think it's going to be quite interesting that you're going to hear from the panelists. And I'm going to give a quick introduction about my panelists and quickly let them speak, and then they're going to share their views. So I'm going to start with my very first one, Anupa. Anupan, actually from Tata, a person and a company that I respect a lot. So he's doing from the groundwork to the strategy and policies. So many of the things that he's going to share from a internet exchange point of view, and obviously more than that. And Cecilia from the private law firm, and I call her the data privacy lady because she is one of the first batch of people who look at the data privacy and who understand them. And she's working on that. So obviously, over the last few years, the changes has been happening, the evolvement. So I think she's going to give us a good insight of it. And Raj is a person I respect a lot, right? He's the vice president for ISOC on the regional VP for the Asia Pacific. And Raj is going to be actually my very first speaker. He's going to give the groundwork and some of the background to set the scene so we all know where we have been going through and where we're going to. And Tom is from the censorship on the content moderation. So he's from Net Chinese, and he's a researcher. So Tom is specialized in the CSAM, and we're going to hear some probably stories about how he did that and what is his based on. Are there laws applied that he can do that easily or harder to apply to the other segment of it? And last but not least, I think we have one speaker who's going to be coming from remote, Nayata. So she's from Ku in India. So from the social media point, she sees something. And from the legal point of view, I think she's going to give us some insight on that. And of course, my wonderful partner, Bikram, my co-chair, he is also having a lot of understanding and comments. We're going to have hopefully a very lively discussion here. So none of our speakers are planned for any presentation slides. So we welcome a lot of the interaction from the floor also, as well as from remote. So I ask you to give your comments and also come to the microphone. If there's any comments and questions, we can have a very interactive dialogue here. So I know we started late and I don't want to end it late because there's the social I think everybody's looking forward to. So let me stop here and give my microphone to Raj, okay? The floor is yours. Raj, do you prefer here? Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you, Joy. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back in person. Been a long time, and it's nice to be in the Philippines to be taking this. That's what my whole So, Chris, I just wanted to kind of join the Philippines in setting up this session. So, when I was invited to do this, I was a bit uncertain on what is it that I would actually be asked to do. But after I saw my fellow panelists and what they were going to speak on, I realized this is literally like a mini IGF forum here, particularly the issues that we cover, and of course, the subject matter experts around me. So I will not be that brave or adventurous where I'll try and cover things they talked about. So I thought I'd just share some wider thoughts with all of you on some of the issues that I think we are facing today. Now, obviously, APRICOT's an Internet Operational Technologies Conference, but we also have to recognize there are other issues at play from the regulatory and policy front, which can, in fact, they do affect how we run our networks and what happens on them. One of the things that, I keep on saying every time I seem to be speaking like this, every year or every second year, is that, we are at a crossroads again. It seems we never go beyond those crossroads because every year there's something new that's thrown at us that we need to deal with. It's an evolving landscape. We know that it's quite dynamic. And interestingly enough, over the last 3 years, I think one thing that the whole world faced, of course, as we all know, was the pandemic. But that at the same time, that also demonstrated the utility and value of the internet, right? And what it can potentially do. And unfortunately, that last bit, or potentially what it can do, in other words, the power the internet has, I think that's also raised some flags in many places. As much as we use the internet to try and have some semblance of normal life. At the same time, I think we've had governments, some companies, recognizing and realizing that they need to better leverage what the internet can become. And I think that's where one of the issues that we're going to face going forward in a lot of ways. One of the most, and interestingly enough, in the last 2 or 3 years, just after the pandemic started, we've seen a stream of draft policies and regulations coming from around the world. So not just in this region, outside this region as well. And if you look at what's been happening, they're all trying to basically attack parts of the internet, at least the open internet as we know it, right? So if you've been involved with the internet community, you've seen how it's evolved for the last, 3 decades or so now. It's not it's evolved in a very different manner to how, let's say, the telecom industry or the telecom networks of old evolved and how they were set up. And what we are seeing is that there's an ever-tightening grip that's being put on the internet, be it via social media controls, be it privacy issues, encryption, there's a long list of topics and issues that are coming to play. And we are seeing draft laws, draft legislation, which are attacking all of these. And I'm sure some of my fellow panelists will expand on those a little bit. Now, the downside to all that is, so the other downside, historically, we've had a few countries around the world that have been very supportive of the open internet. Unfortunately, those very countries now as well, including my own country, are doing things which are potentially affecting the open internet and for it to evolve and into the future. And in the overall scheme of things, it's network operators and service providers which become the natural target, because you can't really control the user. To control the user, you have to control what they're using, right? And so therefore, it's the network services, it's the content services, et cetera, that becomes the natural target. There's lots of legal obligations placed on them. And if you're a network operator, your licensing conditions determines what you can do and what you can't do. So if you have a regulatory order passed upon you, you have to act upon that regulatory order. We saw that in Myanmar, for instance, when the military took over, regulatory orders were issued. The network operators had no choice. They had to comply or face, potential drastic action by the powers that be. And in all this, some of you again may remember the network neutrality debates that we thought we had laid to rest, 10-ish years ago? Well, they seem to be coming back again now. And there seems to be this confusion by some at the regulatory level that, what a network operator is and what it isn't. Now, fundamentally, as we all know, you move packets from A to B to C, right? You don't see what's happening within those packets. That's not really your scope of what you do. You're just moving stuff which someone is paying a connection for, right? And that, I think, brings up the issue of intermediate reliability. I'm sure some of you recognize what I was trying to get at there. And that's, we're seeing more and more that's becoming problematic. And it's not just one law or one set of laws that are causing those issues. Things are coming from the copyright law angle, coming from censorship, from social media, from CSAM. There's various ways that those issues are coming to the fore that I think we have to try and figure out as a community, how do we deal with it? I mentioned encryption before, so that's another problem that's layered on top, right? Because if the connections are encrypted, the operators don't actually know what's there. Even the content providers don't know what's there, right? If you're using an encrypted messaging system as an example. But yet we're having calls for lawful intercept, for LEA access and all that. But it's not as simplistic as switching two wires on a switchboard like in the days of old, right? The internet and today's IP systems don't work like that. So there's this, I think, awareness and education gap. I know a lot of our organizations have spent a lot of time and resources over the years trying to educate policymakers and regulators, but we keep on coming back to the same issue over and over again. And I think post-pandemic, or as we get out of this pandemic, those issues are getting even stronger. And so we need to figure out how do we deal with those. The other big problem, and I've got my friend from India here, internet shutdowns. On the one hand, we want digital, if you had Bill Torres speak earlier, digital transformation, how it can change things, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, you've got countries who are saying, we want digital transformation, we want to build a digital economy, but then they keep on shutting down the internet all over the country, at sometimes, the silliest of reasons sometimes. So, you can't have both, right? You can't aspire to be a digital economy and then you keep on shutting down parts of the internet in various parts of the country. This doesn't make sense. And then, of course, going up a further level, we've had some recent calls of cutting a whole country off the internet due to political and or geopolitical reasons. Now, we all know that the internet doesn't really respect geographical boundaries, right? And in today's modern digital systems, there's so many dependencies that, cutting off an entire country, you don't know what the implications of that will be on other services. Financial systems and economic systems depend on the internet and the infrastructure that they're built on. So you can't just assume that we'll just cut off something and everything will be fine. It doesn't quite work like that. And and that, of course, we'll use the word splinternet or fragmenting the internet, which is a major concern for us at the Internet Society, and I'm hoping for many of you as well, because there are wider implications of what that means and where we could end up as a result. Now, the very reason the internet has been able to give us so much is because it's been, one, open, and two, globally connected. Things just work because there are a set of standards. You respect the RFCs, and everything hopefully will be relatively fine. We say it's a network of networks, but at the same time, increasingly, I think we are seeing it starting to become a network of disconnected networks. There's a lot of action being taken by various parties, and it's not just countries, I should say, right? There's also the private sector and other agencies which are involved in this. So what we don't want to see is a network of disconnected networks, because then it's not the internet anymore. I don't know what it would be then. So I'll stop there. I hope that's a bit of food for thought. And, my fellow panelists have got some great some very interesting issues they will bring up as well. And then I hope we can have a bit of interaction later. So again, Joy and Vikram, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Wonderful, Raj. I think nobody can say it better. There's so many things that we are covering and we touch on. And so I'm going to turn this microphone to Cecilia. I call her the data lady because she works with the privacy and security. Let's talk about what do you think about the privacy versus security? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm Cecil. I actually work in the field in telecommunications. So we do get to see a lot of privacy issues. We in our different lines of business, we get to see a lot of concerns that are being raised, as well as questions about how we balance the need to protect privacy vis-a-vis the requests of governments, as well as how to balance the needs of the business vis-a-vis the need for regulation. So in the I'll be talking mostly about the Philippines, but as you can see, the Philippine experience is also echoed in a number of countries that are just now starting to have a privacy regulation structure. So in the Philippines, the Data Privacy Act was actually set up in 2012, but it took a while. It was actually only in 2016 that a privacy commission was constituted. And from then, the implementation was already, continuous. And so when the Privacy Commission was constituted, their initial focus was on education because there was not really a lot of ideas about privacy. In fact, in the Philippines, as I'm sure you will also see this in other Asian contexts, we are very much oriented toward the family, toward the community. So it was actually a challenge in the beginning to be able to say that people have privacy rights, even against or among their family members. And so this was a challenge. So the regulator had to focus on education, and it's since 2016, so now it's 2022. It is only last year, basically, that the regulator has started really focusing on implementation. So in 2022, finally, the regulator was able to come out with schedule of administrative fines, and that actually changes the ball game. Now we see that more and more entities are becoming more serious in the way that they comply, primarily because of the stiff penalties. So in terms of the fines, we now have as much as 3% of the annual gross income as the ceiling for penalties for major violations. Aside from that, our law also provides for the right to civil damages, as well as criminal actions against officers of the corporations who are found to have committed privacy violations. But it is not actually just the data privacy law that impacts how we process data. We also have to contend with, in the Philippines, we have a Cybercrime Prevention Act. We also have the SIM Card Registration Act, which just came into force in late December. That law also has a number of privacy requirements. And finally, we also have our anti-online sexual abuse and exploitation of children law. So this law imposes a lot of obligations on ISPs and telcos. Okay, so I guess the primary question when it comes to privacy is how entities like telcos and ISPs are able to protect customer personal data in a way that they are both effective in protecting as well as compliant with applicable laws and regulations. So we can see here that okay, I'm going to discuss this on two perspectives. So from the side of the privacy regulator, they do have a lot of tools at their disposal. So in the Philippines, we have a requirement that the entity should register with the Privacy Commission. So we register the entity, whether they are acting as controllers or processors. We also register the data protection officer. So a DPO is required in the Philippines once you reach a certain threshold for the number of individuals whose personal data you are processing. Our privacy regulator also has mandatory breach notification requirements. And we are supposed to comply with the notification requirements within 72 hours from discovery of the incident. The privacy regulator also conducts privacy sweeps and compliance checks. And a lot of times, these compliance checks are done without the knowledge of the entity. So they rely, primarily they rely on publicly available information or materials that a certain entity puts up, and they get to see whether their privacy notices, the privacy statements are compliant. I mentioned earlier, they also have the power to issue administrative fines, and that our law also provides for criminal and civil liability. Now, when it comes to the telcos or the ISPs, operationally, this could also be a challenge. So as I mentioned, we have the requirement to appoint and register DPOs. We are also required to conduct privacy impact assessments. I think this is different in the GDPR, because in the GDPR, the requirement does not cover all of the processing activities. In the case of the Philippines, we do have to do that for all privacy processing activities that we do. Finally, the regulator is now starting to also require privacy by design in the way that we develop our products. And we also now have growing vendor risk management systems, because we are seeing that it's really not enough that an entity is able to protect the data within its ecosystem, but a lot of times the weak points are actually with respect to your vendors or to other entities with whom you share your data. So based on my experience working on privacy, what we are actually seeing now is apart from the very real need to respond to data subjects and to comply with the laws, I think what will make it more of a challenge in terms of compliance is just the level and number of documentation that you actually have to do. I do not think that the lawmakers or even the regulators, when they were making these rules, were able to anticipate just how tedious and actually also difficult it is to document, because we also have to have our register of our data processing activities. And you really need to take a look at all of the aspects of the data life cycle, to whom you share this data. Even just the determination of the applicable retention periods could be a challenge, because even if it's just one processing activity, you could have different types of data that is being processed for different reasons and based on different legal basis. So because of all of those considerations, there will need to be different data retention periods. And as much as it is a challenge for big corporations, the fact is that they have access to resources, so they could acquire a system which would make it easier for them to comply. But really, for the smaller and the medium-sized companies, this will be a challenge because it requires a lot of resources. It also requires a lot of people that are knowledgeable not only with the privacy requirements, but also with the operations of the company, the results or the implications or the consequences of using certain types of technologies. Okay, so anyway, I will end my presentation there, and I'll be happy to address any other questions that you have later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. We asked Cecilia to be here because number one, she's from Philippines, and that's a good experience to share what's happening here while we are sitting in this area. But I'm sure that it's very similar to a lot of the other economies here in the Asia Pacific. So this is interesting to know that. And one thing I noted is that Cecilia says that privacy by design. There are times when I'm sitting in different rooms talking about, like, say, cybersecurity. They say security by design. So design is really a critical thing when we're talking about the usabilities, the design of it, and also to be able to comply and the operational capability of it. So I think it's really very interesting to hear from all the different aspects. And I'm sure that in every economy, every country, that we are trying to having the privacy laws, but sometimes we all know that the law comes after the behavior, much later. So a lot of the behavior is happening now, and what do we see and how much we can pick it up. So I want to kind of like take a pause here and to see if there's any questions from the floor or if there's anything from the remote. And if you have any question you'd like to dialogue with our speakers, I think this is a good time. And also we can leave it to a little bit later after we hear from the others. If I do not see anybody, I'm going to pass the microphone to Tom. Tom has been focusing on the CSAM, which is one of the things on the content moderation. He has a good deep dive from there. So I think he's going to be sharing with us some of the stories, some of the things that he has seen, and elaborate on that part of it. So Tom?
Thank you, Joy. I'm Tom. I'm from Net Chinese and Net Talent. And Net Chinese is an ICANN-accredited registrar specialized in domain names, and we also branch into hostings and also trademark protection for our clients. And Net Talent is a new startup that specializes in internet policy research and also CSAM processing. And we at Net Chinese and Net Talent care about CSAM because the amount of hate speech and child sexual abuse or exploitation material online is increasing very quickly. And we believe they are actually having a huge impact on the modern society. And we at Net Chinese and Net Talent are willing to act on these CSAMs is because we care for the current and future generations, and that we believe that we want to clean the internet to how it first started. And because we believe that the internet is a place where people can come together to share knowledge and to create and innovate greatness. So this is why we care. And regarding CSAM, there's actually a lot of things that we try to do, but because, as many of our previous panelists have said, because of difference in legislations and also because of the deepness on which they hide behind the scenes. So it's actually very hard for us as processors to just say, we know it's there and just to act on it. It's the process is not as easy as what people think they are. So we actually work with different law enforcement, and also the different justice department, and also different industry partners to process them. So this is my brief introduction. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, I know that this is a hard topic, but are you getting like, how do you balance between the fairness and accuracy for doing so? And I'm sure that there's a lot of the resources you need in order to do so. Perhaps you can say a few words before we're passing on.
There's inaccuracy. Firstly, is because we cooperate with many of our government authorized child protection agencies. So they provide us with the reports. So firstly, those reports are already recognized. So then there's we process based on their information. So there's less controversial on that. So this is how we work on. And when we work on, even with our own clients, is that we try not to take down the entire website because of maybe one specific page, but we try to let them know something is going on and let them handle it, or to inform the relevant partners that there's something going on, that they should act on it. So we try not to destroy an entire website because of one specific page of incidents. Unless it's really serious, then we also move it up, should it be necessary.
Yeah, thank you. I think content moderation is never an easy topic to talk about because it involves a lot of the different the different aspect of it. And but I understand that from the global point of view, CSAM is one of the less controversial, because we understand the harm it's doing for future generations and everything. So it's good to hear from that. So how about if we're looking from an IXP point of view? Anupa is going to share with us from the internet exchange point of view, provider that has even more parties that you have involved. There's the ISP, there's the content, there's the infrastructure, policies and regulations, and almost everybody you have to touch with. So I'm sure you have lots of experience to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be with Raj in particular. So around 12 years back, when I first met him, we formed a chapter in Calcutta. So 5-7 years was gone. Then I met him again in 2014. He said, look at the core of the internet. Again, 7 years gone. So we are meeting after 14 years. I am sure something will change again. So in 2014, when we were thinking about doing something at the core of the internet, it was at that time we realized that there is something called root instance. There is an IXP. Before that, it was all along a capacity building and awareness thing. So we first started in 2014 somewhere with a root server instance in India. And I'll come to IX. So this is a story which you need to know. So we started with a root server instance. We approached a lot of root server providers. Nobody gave any feedback, leave alone the root instance itself. And somehow I landed up in an ICANN meeting and they said that, are you an ISP? I said, no. Are you an IX? No. Are you a content provider? No. Okay, then you qualify for an L root instance. So, so that was really amazing. So we started with an L root instance. We gathered the money to buy the L root instance. And then the question was how much bandwidth it requires. So they said that 2 Mbps is good enough. So 2 Mbps we managed somehow. And the moment we switched on the L root instance in 2014, within 3 or 4 hours, it was completely choked. So it had to literally plugged out. So then we realized that 2 Mbps is not enough. We had a lot of conversation with ICANN. And we realized that it requires 20 Mbps minimum. Now, this was the first myth buster that root instances don't require bandwidth. So it really depends upon the location where you are putting it and that what kind of traffic it will flow. Then as it became live and there were certain amount of traffic, which was to the tune of 4,000 to 6,000 queries per second, we became a little more ambitious. We said that we now need an authoritative server as well, and we need one more instance. So we approached VeriSign, and VeriSign was very kind enough to ship us the complete box. And after it was shipped, we realized that we need to have an IX because it is very different from how the LRoot instance works. So now how do you set up an IX? So the first we went to Google, searched it that an IX can be created in $1,000. So that was the first video we watched at the ISOC chapter level that yes, we need to create an IX. Now we managed a switch. Somehow we started it, but there was only one peer, which was VeriSign. So apart from that, there was no one, no ISPs, no content providers. And then we started looking for ISPs, we started looking for content providers, and we found that the toughest part is getting these people on board into the IX. So trust is the key theme why the IX operates. And that was something which was literally non-existent because we were just a chapter. And in the middle of all this, because we were a chapter, there was a lot of, what should I say, a negative feedback that we are driving the US agenda or something of internet society. So what we had to do literally was to create another organization called India Internet Foundation, which started hosting the IX. And that's where the regulatory agencies said that, okay, now you are an India-based organization, you have your own agenda. So now you can start. Basically, there is not much a problem. So you move ahead. So again, trust was something which we had to build from the start. And moving on, we got a couple of content providers. The first one was Akamai, and I am taking this name because that really helped us to grow from where we are. So we had one VeriSign, one Akamai, and one ISP. So that was my internet exchange point in 2017. So 3 years had gone by that time. Now we land up, and it was not growing in that sense. And we were managing the cost by doing some courses within the foundation and then taking that money out to sustain the IX. In 2019, we hosted CENOG in Calcutta, thanks to the CENOG leadership that they agreed to host it in Calcutta. And that is where, again, things changed drastically for us. But one of the key feedback which we received was that since you are running a community IX, the name is IIFON-IX, which looks like it is your own property, and it really doesn't suit the way you want to take it ahead. So we renamed it to Kolkata IX. And that again, we established certain amount of trust with the community, and it changed again. So all along in this IXP journey, I have found that building the trust either with the regulatory agency or with the peers or with the community, that is something which is extremely important. Now currently we are operating at a peak traffic of around 20 gig whenever there is an IPL. People who are not aware of IPL, it is Indian Premier League, which is the most celebrated event for 45 days in India. And the traffic is unbound at that point in time. So, and our $2,000 Optilink was not able to manage it. So we requested Internet Society to give us a switch. So now we are an IX where the switch is donated, the bandwidth is donated, IXP manager we use, which is also a thing for the community. There is a broadband partner who supplies all the bandwidth for filling up the cache. So everything is now working on a donation basis. We just recover the cost from the peers month to month to sustain it from 1 month to another. Now, at this point in time, the first challenge as an IX was to establish the trust with the peers, because the ISPs wanted, the reason why they are connecting to us is because of the neutrality. We are not an ISP. We are not a content provider. We are simply operating as a layer 2 switch. which is the core of IX, and neutrality is an extremely important factor in here. The second was in terms of the regulatory challenges. We really don't have an idea whether we are operating on the legal side or the not so legal side, because there is no regulation currently as of now that whether or not an IX has to be a registered body with the Department of Telecom. But the good news is that around a couple of months back, there is a recommendation from TRAI, which is Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, that there will be a light touch regulation for all the IXs in the country. And we welcome that, because it is much better to operate in a fashion wherein things are more on the clearer ground. We don't know the kind of regulation it is going to be, that we'll have to pay taxes or whatever, but at least this fear of not knowing that whether we are on which side of the coin we are, and that is something which as part of our community, most of the people agree that it is good to have some kind of regulation so that we can work on the expansion of it now. Now we have a community built around the IX. We have ISPs who are willing to peer, and we have content providers who are also peered with us. So things are all set, but this regulation bit is something which we will have to work upon. In the meantime, we also worked on an internet measurement project in India, which again, we could deliver only because of the community which we had built. So currently we have around 100 vantage points or 100 points in India from where we collect certain amount of data that how internet is operational in India. And most of these devices are a Raspberry Pi 3B plus devices, which are hosted within the educational institutions. So there is no threat of having some private data or something. So these are absolutely within the educational institutions and NOCs of certain organizations, just to see that what is the current latency, what is the current buffering, so on and so forth. So we recently presented also into the DINR conference that what we have done in India. So all this together, running an IX, I have been able to find out two key things. One, that for a country like India, where the content has to move to the edge, because 5 years earlier, there were two systems which were operating. There was a digital way of doing things, and there was also a manual way of doing things. Now you cannot withdraw money from a bank if you are not digitally literate. So that idea of going with a passbook and filling up a check and then taking out money is somewhere far behind. Prime Minister Modi's thrust on Digital India has brought in many people onto the digital bandwagon. So now it is very important that we are able to service them. If we are not able to give them the digital quality of the internet at the grassroots, then this entire effort will go in vain. So IXPs are required to be there as a local IXPs and what we term as rural IXs. While there will be big IXs operational at different cities, on the ground, there is a requirement for rural access so that content is delivered at the edge. In terms of that, we are currently talking with the state data center, because most of the content required by the people of the state are with the state data center. So if they peer with us, the real content will be delivered to the people for the services which they require for day-to-day of their lives. Currently, we have been able to deliver on an annual basis somewhere around 500,000 savings to all the ISPs every year because of the savings which they have been able to do. And they are being requested not to take this money home, but to invest at least a part of it in building up their infrastructure. So now, if you look at our members in the region, they are putting that money on having their own DNS instance. They are willing to try with Manras because now they are getting value of this entire thing. So at the end, summarizing that IXPs are directly proportional to the internet resiliency in the region. The number of IXs are more, the internet resiliency will increase, and IXPs create a huge social impact. And if we want that positive impact, we need to create more IXs in the region. Thank you.
Wonderful. So the first challenge is on the trust, which you pretty much overcome. So now it's regulation. I'm sure that there's going to be more challenges coming along the line. And as you said, the content is going to be on the edge. So, but I'm really happy to hear you saying that all this sort of like the profit coming to reinvest back to, where it's going to be put in good use. Wonderful. So before I go on to the next, I think that there is a question from the remote. So Bikram, do you want to take care?
Yeah, here's a question for Tom. You from the Amrita. So questions is, does your organization work along with Internet Watch Foundation?
Thank you. We are in contact and currently in the process of seeking cooperation with the IWF, but we are already a member of other CSM processing organizations. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I think this is not something that you can do by yourself. So it's really the collaboration of it. So I have my other speaker who is remote dialing, that's Nyati. And she's coming from the social media platform. So when we're looking at the social media, it has been very strong, and everybody probably cannot live without it. We love it, we hate it. So I like to having her talk about the social media platform point of view and how to manage like the hate speech, the fake news, other forms of misinformation. And obviously she's going to cover more than that. So let me just give the time to, yeah, there you are. Okay, Yati, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy. Thanks a lot. And very good afternoon, good evening. It's afternoon here.
Wait a little bit because we're not hearing from your voice. We have your the image.
Oh, you were not able to hear me? Could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well now. Could you start again? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope I'm audible still.
Yes, yes.
Could you? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joy. And, it's been a pleasure listening to all of my other fellow panelists. Yes, we very rightly put it, social media, whether we like it or we don't, it simply can't live without it, and it's ubiquitous. And here I am. I represent an organization called CooApp. We're a very young social media platform, but in a span of just about 3 years, we've actually grown tremendously to over 60 million plus user base. Spanning not just only India, but also, parts of Latin American region, and as well as Europe and some parts in the US too. And yes, as a social media platform, we continuously, walk a thin line between, all sorts of our commitment to free speech, with also the responsibility of the platform towards managing some of the really tough tech policy issues of hate speech, fake news, misinformation. Here, I would like to bring in a perspective that why Koo started was to basically provide users a safe and a trusted microblogging platform in which they can express themselves in their own language. So language should not be a barrier to their expression. We wanted this barrier to go away. Now, to ensure that, these engagements remain meaningful, of course, we have our community guidelines. Now, these community guidelines are typically designed to foster a very safe and a respectful space for people to be able to express themselves. And they are also designed respecting the local law of the country we operate in. We firmly believe that lawmakers, are in the best position to understand the local cultural context and within which, the laws are formed. And so we believe that, if we create our own legal rules and structures over and above what law states, it becomes too authoritarian, even as a platform, because ultimately we're an intermediary. So we do not want to, kind of go beyond, what the law really states, so that, and because that may come in the way of freedom of speech. Now, when we talk about, the issues like, misinformation and hate speech, any content, that violates the law of the land or is the subject matter of valid legal order will be removed, and that's pretty clear. And the violation are basically primarily identified in two different ways. One is, of course, the human moderation, wherein as a user, if you have found something of offensive, you can go and report it, and then our team of moderators looks at it and take action. And of course, we have automated tools in terms of algorithm which looks into different aspects of it. And when we are doing this content moderation, we take utmost care that we do not err. And if at all we have erred, because after all, it's still a work in progress, we always welcome users to submit an appeal for restatement, and we very happily reconsider it also. Now, to ensure that there is fairness in content moderation, we typically work on a so the management is triangulated on meaning, severity, and frequency. So prioritization, of course, is given to the most consequential cases, and other important principle that we follow is to manage the content first, and then the creator. So whatever content falls within the definition of, a hate speech or a misinformation, it is taken away. And the creator is also provided reasons for removal and an ability to appeal or ask for reinstatement. And in extreme cases only, we implement our own version of digital law enforcement, wherein we have to take steps to restrict visibility of the content to other users, or notify or receive notifications, etc. And of course, similarly, for hate speech as well, it's very clearly defined, what constitutes a hate speech. So anything that is excessively inflammatory or instigating or demeaning to religion, nation, or persons, that falls into hate speech. And typically in an online world, it manifests itself as an abusive text or an abusive handle or username or pictures or videos. And of course, we have our in-house algorithmic tools to identify those and take them down. And like I mentioned that we give our users also the way to report such content. And additionally, we keep our algorithms keep learning newer and newer abusive words and slurs, so that they can be removed as and when they come by. Now, when we do that, of course, a user, we also have a very robust redressals, mechanism in place, which is a 3-tiered system, wherein, a user can anytime write to our resident grievance officer and, can register their complaint, which is very expeditiously, action is taken, especially in cases of CSAM, nudity, pornography, those extreme cases. We also have a nodal contact officer who works 24/7 with government bodies, and the data protection officer and a chief compliance officer. So all this is all structured as per the, as is mandated by law, and it operates with complete transparency and fairness. So of course, these are, and, we always take a very proactive approach towards the, misinformation and disinformation. And it's very different from other platforms, which are mostly reactive, wherein our own in-house misinfo and disinfo algorithm, it, actively detects and labels such content pieces in various manners. So we have a database of malicious links, and this database is very actively updated at all point of time. We also have a database of news articles, links, etc. Then we also work very closely with the IFC and certified fact checker, and we also provide a lot of tools for our users to also discern, and empower them with resources wherein they can also go and fact check, on their own. We do not necessarily impose, our own, views per se. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer any other specific question, but I thought I'd just leave it at that at this point of time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear you say all this, all the work that you've been doing. I'm sure it's helping a lot to keep the community and keep your site safe and accurate. There's some reactive things that you do, as you say, that if you see things that's being violated and you take it down and do things. I was wondering on the preventive side, if there's anything that you can share with us, because I understand that it could be, major resources that you're going to have to devote it. And sometimes the things, and also to my other panelists, maybe some of the things we know and we can share, it's that like major events such as elections or, health crisis, and even on some high profile news event. How do you deal with it, and how do maybe we wish to see? So I give also, the opportunity for my panelists. You might like to share what you know or what we wish. So Let's do that. So the question is preventive action resources that you needed to take. How do you deal with it? You know?
Sure, sure, Joyce. So let me just, discuss about the elections bit, because, we've had a couple of assembly elections, So, of course, as a multilingual microblogging platform, we encourage a lot of sharing of thoughts, and politics, like sports, entertainment, poetry, garners considerable attention from users and creators, who indulge in a lot of freewheeling conversation around that topic. Now, as a neutral, transparent, and reliable platform, we stand committed to free and fair elections. We have initiated multiple mechanisms towards curbing the spread of malice and misinformation, especially during election time. And we also augment a lot of voter literacy and confidence, in the electoral process. So there's a lot of information, sharing also that we do. Now, our community guidelines, first of all, they're available in multiple languages. So, people can easily read through them. And they are, they are basically attuned to the local context also in a way of thought, and detail the kind of conduct that is permissible or prohibited online, with specific reference to fake news and misinformation. So these community guidelines, they sensitize users on verifying the credibility of information, while also refraining from calling out information as fake without having adequate proof for the same as well. And also, we do not, so basically, and like I mentioned that, we work with a lot of third party fact checking agencies as well. And we also have, a dedicated resource center wherein we always, encourage our users to go and check, the veracity of news. We have, in India specifically, we've also adopted the voluntary code of ethics, that is instituted by the Election Commission of India itself, that aspires to be fair and ethical use of social media during elections. And, we continuously, do the voter literacy program, voter education program, we do a number of outreach to college students, youths as well. And then, of course, our, grievance officer also takes care of, any kind of very quick, redressal, very quick queries that come in. So these are some of the preventive measures, we take around elections.
Wonderful. From my panelists, anybody have any comments you want to make on this, and others from the previous talk, Raj and Cecilia, whatever?
Well, in relation to addressing crisis or, well, instances where there are misuse of information, I think one example that we can talk about is that last year in the Philippines, there were a lot of cases of smishing or sending of SMS, and then users are asked to go to a certain well, the SMS usually contains a URL, and the recipients are asked to go to the URL, and that's where the scams or the frauds will be perpetrated. So that was a big issue in the Philippines. I think for the past year and a half, and this is also the reason why we now have a SIM registration law. This was mainly because of the public outcry, because, well, the perception and the truth actually is that a lot of the telcos were not really able to prevent this. But there was a perception among the public, and there is an expectation among the regulators that the telcos would be able to help in identifying the perpetrators. Unfortunately, at that time, there was no requirement for the for SIMs to be registered, and based on the investigation, a lot of the, well, all of the numbers that are being used for the smishing were really prepaid SIMs. So these are unregistered. That was a big issue. We required to work closely with the regulators, in this case, the National Telecommunications Commission, as well as the National Privacy Commission. So in tandem with this authorities, we work to block the numbers that have been identified and proven to have been sending the smishing messages. There were also instances where some URLs were identified by the regulators and were taken down or made inaccessible after having been shown to have also been participating. In fact, one of the telcos in the Philippines also took a rather what do you say, more and not a, the word that comes to mind is extreme, but of course I don't want to describe it that way. But basically what they did was just to bar all URLs that were being sent in the messages. But that was the step taken by only one telco. The other two telcos did not follow. So basically what we're looking at, what's interesting for us now is what will be the effect of the SIM registration law. The law took effect on December 27, and there is a requirement of 180 days within which all holders of all current holders of prepaid SIMs need to register their SIMs. And we are now waiting to see whether there will be significant effect in curbing the SMS or smishing messages. So what we are seeing right now is that it appears to have gone down primarily because you can no longer buy new prepaid SIMs without registering. So in order now, under the law, in order to activate your SIM, you need to register. But there are still a lot of previously purchased prepaid SIMs that are out there, and we still continue actually to receive smishing messages currently.
So, in terms of blocking and filtering things, I guess one of the questions that comes to mind is, when does it become, obviously there are certain instances where it is an issue, but sometimes what we're also seeing is it's political action that's driving banning something or blocking something or filtering something. Now, if it's an entity, a service provider, be it a content service provider or a network operator that exists in just one country, it's maybe a bit easier to implement because, what I said in the beginning, licensing conditions, I give you this order, you have to implement that order. But then we have a lot of companies which are multinational in nature, right? And I think that's been one of the challenges as well. We all know that laws are not harmonized across, laws are different in every country, right? And one of the things the internet has done is, it's really helped us with economies of scale, right? We can replicate and scale up things quite quickly. But we can only do that when there's a level playing field for everyone. If the laws keep on changing, and in some cases every second week, or at least some sort of new order is placed on someone, it's hard to re-engineer things, at least at the regional or global level, right? You have to go right down to the granular level. Okay, it's not hard either, but it does start to affect the cost of doing business. And so I think that balance is very important. And then, the other question, which I think has been around forever since the internet's been around, is who decides what is right or wrong to be said or done, right? CSAM was spoken about earlier. Now, some years ago, we did a bit of research because it was becoming a problem. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware or not, but even the definition of what a child is very significantly within our region. So just in the Asia Pacific, different countries have a different definition of what a child is, as well as what the age of consent is. So even that is not harmonized. So then how do you apply a boilerplate set of laws across the whole region or across the whole globe when the countries themselves have different laws defining what those things are? So it starts getting very, very complicated. And that's why I keep coming back to the fact that, the internet is there to help us do things better, faster, cheaper. But the more roadblocks we put in front of it, then that sort of starts to negate that advantage that we have. So, and as we evolve even further with what technology can do, I think it's getting even more complicated. I won't even get into crypto and all that sort of stuff because that's the whole stuff. So yeah, maybe someone else wants to speak.
No, from a remote participants. Amrita is raising her hand. Can you go ahead, Amrita?
Thank you, Bikram, Amrita, for the records, and thank you for this discussion. And it is quite close to my heart, discussing a lot of things, which is important and
We
pertinent.
couldn't hear your
Um,
voice.
Okay.
Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for this discussion and the topics which are being discussed. And I agree with what Raj mentioned. Content monitoring or content filtering is quite a tricky thing, because many times what seems objectionable to a particular government may not be objectionable to a particular community, because we have seen across in regulations that while governments definitely want to they want the best for the citizens, but at sometimes too much of regulation also poses a curb on freedom of speech, right to expression, etc., or is aligned to a political party. So that at times becomes a challenge. If you're talking about data privacy and security, well, that debate always goes, but it is also proved that privacy goes hand in hand with security, else it doesn't work. But unfortunately, in many countries in Asia Pacific, the data privacy regulations are still not there. And data is treated as a new oil, which I personally do not agree on. So I think protecting the data of individuals is also important. Simultaneously, what is important is also the harmonization of regulations across nations, which is difficult to go, but if certain principles, overarching principles, are agreed upon by different regulators or governments, perhaps that can help. And for that, if there is more conversations, it is better. For example, many times the regulators are not updated with how technology works. If you're saying you want the first intercept, of an encrypted message, you want the first sender, perhaps that technology may not be able to give so, and you can get the information in a different way. So perhaps those things needs to be looked at. Regulations are great, but a nuanced approach towards regulations may be better, and perhaps those discussions are needed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Content filtering are subjective and technical requirement, whereas censorship is a regulatory and compliance requirement. So we know that data is new well, but as we are the government is regulating, because of they want to protect every citizen. So that's how. So next I have Niyati Burma. You raise your hand, so can you unmute yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Bikram. I'm just going back to the question that Joy had asked, on some of the preventive measures, that, we take, especially on misinformation during special, big events like elections. So this is definitely one thing, that we at COO have done. And in fact, that's a global first. So we allow a voluntary self-verification on the platform. Now, a lot of harm actually comes online because of, this feature of anonymity. So now when I'm sitting here, in front of everybody, I know that, everybody knows me and I am responsible, in my conduct. But the moment, I go behind a black screen and I have some XYZ name, now I suddenly, get that empowerment in me that, okay, now I can, now I can just do, whatever I would like to. So to basically, help curb that, misinformation and disinformation and basically any online bad behavior, we also have this special feature which has been working very well. It's completely voluntary. The data is not stored with us, but, any user can voluntarily verify themselves with a government issued ID card, and the data is fully encrypted. So that also has been really helpful in managing more meaningful interactions online. So I thought I'd just add that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have very limited time, so if anyone have anything to add on, please.
that's fine. If there's any questions, we like to take it, or we can take it offline, because that's also the time for we to interact, at the social and everything. But due to the interest of time, I'm going to ask Bikram, maybe you can make a final remarks for our session, and then we can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is lots of content itself we had discussed here. So content filter is one of major, as we said, that it's technical as well as it's subjective also. And we talk about censorship, we talk about regulation, and even in internet shutdown in India, in our part of the world also, we have talked. And we talk about geopolitics. Because of the geopolitics, there is a fragmentation, so the internet, and even we have been talking about the internet in environmental. So now we can see directly in our part of the world, in Everest region, there is lots of, because of the climate change, there is impact is going on. So that's, I need to add in one thing. So freedom of expression is also a right to privacy. So it's we discuss on different topic in privacy as well as in regulatory requirements. So even in data GDPR, we had talked. Cecilia had this brief about the data life cycles, and technology has been evolved. And it's more about the privacy on the internet. So I had this note down on the Anupam part that regulatory challenges they have been facing, and the community actions they have been driving to drive itself and to get trust from the community. And that's one of the challenges the community network, community actions has been facing the challenges. So I think we have covered almost all agenda, whatever we want to have. If anyone to add last, so we can have, and then we'll conclude.
One last.
Okay, so thank you. It's interesting to note this encryption dialogue, which just was mentioned by fellow panelists. Now, encryption, when you say that the data is encrypted, or the regulation says that the data has to be encrypted, what part of data? The data is stored in a database, whether you encrypt a row, you encrypt a column, whether you encrypt the entire table. So these are some of the nuances which needs to be fed to the people who are creating the regulations, but that is a humongous task. So what is essential is that we create community standards for this kind of things. And that's the role of IETF, or the organizations who make the standards comes into play. We make standards which are vetted by the people who are going to implement it. And that's how we take the discussion forward, instead of looking for every piece of regulation to be there. And that's what I think is my closing comment, that we need to develop community standards to take the discussions further.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I think that those are important comments, and it's a good reflection to looking at this topic. So before we closing this, I just want to make an announcement that the departure of the social event tonight will be depart from the registration desk. I believe maybe around 6:30 is going to start. So can follow the line. Volunteers will direct everyone. Each bus will take about 40 people. So hope to see all of you in the social event. And thank you very much, Anupa, Cecilia, Raj, Tom, and Bikram. Maybe we're trying to be very aggressive, touching a lot of the topics, but I hope that all this finding useful to some of the thoughts and the thinking. Again, appreciate for your participation in the Cooperation SIG. Thank you very much.
I think getting